Welcome to this episode of Clutch Time, where we bring you the hot topics in sports and give you our opinions on it. I'm Jeremy Culver.
And I'm Carl Farron. Joining us today is our lone prop, Ken Griffey Jr. Now it's time to get to some Hawk Talk. The KU men's volleyball team continues their home stretch to wrap up their 2011-2012 season. Their previous outstanding home record of 9-1 has seemed to not make much of a difference, as their home record is now 10-4. Their overall record is 17-11 and 1-9 in the conference. Is there any chance of a truly successful season by winning out their last 3 games, with 2 of them being conference games?
To be honest, no. There's not really. It's a congratulations again that we're going to more than likely, unless there's some games that come out of nowhere, to having a winning record again. Just going 1-9 in a conference, maybe going 3-9 is never really successful. But I will say again, getting a winning record for the second season in a row is a step up in the right direction.
We've been following the volleyball team all season, and we think that they're in the right direction. They're changing from being that D1 school and, getting up to the winning record from the losing record that they had so many years in a row. So having the winning record is a good step forward for the program. But again, the conference doesn't promote, the conference record doesn't truly promote a successful season.
Yeah, and definitely when you look at the last 2 games that they played was against IUPU, and IUPU came in with a 6-game losing streak, 2-5 in the conference, and a 10-12 record overall. And the men's volleyball team can't pull out 1 win, so lowers their home record down, puts them now on a 3-game losing streak. So to see them go to a team that has been struggling of late and still can't even pull out a win, it's going to make this season look a little less great than it could have been. But, they did get a winning record, second season in a row. They're going to improve eventually. They're going to start getting, more recruits as we continue to show that we can get a winning record. You're
right when you said we could have had a great season, because I think a lot of the time they actually underperformed a bit and let games get away from them. Like their last 3 games, they should have at least won 2 of them. The team seems to underperform and let a lot of games, they seem to choke and blow a lot of games because a lot of their games are close. We proved that we can play well. We beat Ohio State, and I think that was a big point in the whole volleyball program.
Yeah. The men's soccer team have opened up their spring season last Saturday. Playing Olivet Nazarene University, the Hawks came out on top, winning 2-0. The Hawks won the GLVC tournament last year and are looking to continue and build their success for the fall season. So, Carl, how do you think the team played on Saturday, and what does this mean for the next season?
Well, being a part of the team, I have an inside view that I can give us here. I know the coaches, they really want to take advantage of these spring games, because the spring games really don't mean all that much, because it's all about, the fall season and making the GLVC tournament. And we cannot recreate these games that we have in the spring. So these opportunities, we have to take, full advantage of them. I think the team, they started out a little slow, a little timid, but we really got into it, and we actually played really well. Towards the end, the team seemed to lose their heads a bit, and we got in a little bit of foul trouble. But other than that, overall, I think we played pretty well.
And you got to remember, the spring season usually is kind of like baseball spring training. It's to get the younger guys who didn't get to play much in the fall season, see what they have, and get them all the familiarities between the players, because the team from last year is always different than next year. So this is a good thing to look at. One thing, though, I will say is, again, this is, getting the new guys out, and we're playing a team that last year did not play very well in their own season. They went 8-10-2, which isn't terrible, but it isn't anywhere near good. But the one thing is I want to know, what do you feel from going off of the game with losing Grant Ellison to graduation? Like, how do you think the team's going to replace him? Who showed up to see as if they're saying, I'm going to take his spot?
I don't think it's just going to be one person. I think it's going to be a definite team effort. Nobody can replace Grant. Grant, made all region. He was 8th in goals and 15th in total points nationally this season. So not one person is going to replace him. It's going to be a team effort, and we have a lot of good offensive skilled guys that can put balls in the net. So I don't think we're going to be in too much trouble there, and we're only graduating 3 seniors, so that's not a lot to fill besides Grant. March Madness has finally come to an end. The Kentucky Wildcats took the championship over the Kansas Jayhawks. Kentucky looked like they might run away with it, but the Kansas comebacks made it into a nail-biter. Did Kentucky win the game, or did Kansas give it away, Jeremy?
I think Kansas kind of gave it away. Kansas definitely played better in the tournament up until that game. They still, if you had watched the game, they did an indoor interview with Bill Self, and Bill Self said the entire tournament they hadn't played their best game, and they saved it for the last game. Well, they didn't show it with their best game again. They came out to a really slow start, took them a long time to try to change things around, and I think that gave Kentucky more than enough energy and edge to win the game because they just built up this big lead and could not seem to be stopped.
Right. Kansas, they had come back from behind and won their last couple games, which is, a big story, and props to Kansas for doing that but they were starting out slow, but in the final game, in the championship round against Kentucky, you can't do that. I mean, they did come back and they made it close, but not close enough.
Yeah, they came back from an 18-point deficit to come back and cutting it down to 4 at one point and then got taken over again. But the one thing that I thought was outstanding of a stat is if you looked at it, Kentucky has won 41 straight games when leading at halftime. So for them to lose after leading at halftime, in my opinion, would have been a big story nationally if Kansas had been able to come back and win somehow. Because going 41 games now, that is a big number to look at.
I think we could look at it in halves. Like Kentucky won the first half, but Kansas, they outscored Kentucky in the second half. But that coming out too flat, and they just let it get too much of a deficit to come back from.
And that's why coaches always preach there's 4 quarters, there's 2 halves, there's 3 periods to each game. And you can't win a game by not showing up all game. If you're going to show up for only half a game, then you're going to get beat. And Kansas, though I love the team and they played really well, gave a great effort in this March Madness, they could not hold up for 2 halves, and it just came to show out in this final game. Soccer in recent years have been getting bigger in the United States, with the recent success of the men's and women's national teams. It finally seems like soccer will get the popularity it has in most of the world. Unfortunately, this may not be true. The U.S. men's soccer team did not qualify for the 2012 Olympics. Does this hurt the image of soccer, or is this not a big deal?
Well, I think it's embarrassing, but it's not that important. In the world of soccer, national soccer, it's about the World Cup. When the U.S. finally wins the World Cup, that will be a mark in history for all soccer, and especially American history for soccer. The Olympics, it would have been, like I said, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and you got to think about it. The Olympics are seen as the national sport where all the greatest athletes come together and battle it out for your country's glory. But one thing is like you said, the biggest deal in soccer is the World Cup. The Olympics is kind of seen as the lesser game. And though most athletes take pride in performing in the Olympics, it's not a big deal there. And also, you got to look at it. This is only the second time the U.S. has not qualified for the Olympics since 1976. So it's not like this is a big shocker, because even as they qualified in past years, soccer still is slowly getting to the pride as the other sports.
Yeah, if we're just strictly speaking American here, I think we could at least look to the women's team, because they're really good right now. They just beat Brazil this morning 3-0, and that's a big statement. Even though they lost to Japan in their World Cup, I don't think Japan won. The women lost, and that just proves that soccer is building up in America.
Yeah, it definitely was a close game when that happened. But one thing I would like to say is keep in mind, this is the U23 national team. It is not the overall national team with Landon Donovan, Tim Howard, and the other big guns. So it's not like all of a sudden we're taking a step back. It's these guys were trying to take a step forward for the team in the future, and they just couldn't come up with it in the end.
Right. The NBA playoffs are right around the corner. With every team having 12 to 16 games left, it's now crunch time. Chicago and Miami are currently safely atop the Eastern Conference, while Oklahoma City and San Antonio lead the West. How do you think the rest of the season will play out to determine the remaining playoff spots, Jeremy?
I think actually it's going to be down to the wire with some teams. Two teams in particular that I think one is going to be shocking is Orlando and the New York Knicks. They're the two teams that I think have the most to prove if they want to stick around. Indiana has been playing pretty well consistently all season long. Boston has definitely turned it around since the All-Star break, and Atlanta has been playing pretty decent, but Orlando is on a free fall, and New York Knicks, they just seem to have big spurts up and down the season. They start off slow, then they won games, then they went back to a losing streak, and now they're back on a winning streak.
Well, I agree with you, Jeremy. Orlando and New York, they've probably been the two biggest stories in the NBA this season. They do definitely have the most to prove here. Having had so much of the spotlight to not make the playoffs, that would be quite a letdown, especially with the Knicks having all their players back now, but unfortunately losing Jeremy Lin because he's going out on surgery. I think that's going to hurt them, and I think without Lin, they're not going to make it to the playoffs, actually.
Yeah, and the team that I think is going to be a big shock if they don't make the playoffs, but potentially looking at it, they might not, is the Dallas Mavericks. Dallas Mavericks have been doing so good all season, even with getting Lamar Odom, though they have not been able to solidify their spot and show that what they did last year. And Dirk Nowitzki has finally started to turn around and pick it up, but now Jason Kidd is hurt. Lamar Odom is hurt. Brendan Haywood is hurt. They're starting to get banged up, and they just cannot seem to stay healthy and build that gel that they had last year.
It's definitely going to be interesting because, like I said earlier, you have your top two teams that I think they'll stay there. You got the Heat and the Spurs and the Bulls, and who else was in there in the West? Oh, it was the Thunder, and they're going to be at top there. But the rest, it's just all mixed up, and everybody's just going to be fighting it out for those last spots.
Now let's talk about some international games. The UEFA Champions League is down to the quarterfinal matches. There's only 8 teams remaining, with 2 of them going down today, and the other 2 tomorrow. With some of the big names in soccer still left, Carl, how do you see the standings shaping out?
I think it's going to come down to the Giants. It's going to be the big names left. Bayern was playing Marseille today, and Barcelona and AC Milan were playing today. Now, I think the Barcelona-AC Milan game was going to be a big game today because they tied in the first leg. But Barcelona is going to come out on top, and Bayern will come out on top, and so will Chelsea and Real Madrid. They're big. They're just too big, too good. They can't be beat.
Yeah, I definitely see the same thing going on. Real Madrid definitely has been showing strong effort throughout this, the UEFA League, and so I really feel like there's no chance that they're not going to advance. Another team is Chelsea. Chelsea always plays well, so that's another team that's going to advance. I think the final may come down to between Real Madrid and AC Milan. I really feel those two teams are going to battle it out for the top because they're usually, the top of the UEFA League anyways, and to see them two to battle it out for the title would be a great showing.
Well, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with you because it's going to come down to the Giants, like I said, and once after the quarterfinals is over, it's anybody's game. But I think after the quarterfinals, everybody's going to be chasing Barcelona because Barcelona has just been atop of the world the past couple of years.
Yeah, and Barcelona does have a really good team with some really good veteran players and young players. The one player, though, that everyone watches when it comes to the soccer world is Cristiano Ronaldo and playing for Real Madrid. And he actually had one of the top events this past weekend, scoring a goal from 30 yards out. Have you ever had to do that in a game?
can't say it was that far, or at least if it was, it wasn't that much of a bullet, I have to say. I don't think I have as powerful legs as Cristiano there.
Yeah, so, but definitely that's going to be a good matchups to see and figure out what happens in the end.
As we're wrapping up our show, we now reach our buzzer beaters. And now here's Jeremy with his.
Thank you, Carl. A couple episodes back, I talked about Illinois basketball and how I felt there needed to be a change at coaching. Well, that has happened. Bruce Weber was fired, and he is now with Kansas State. Illinois went after two highly sought-after coaches, but ended up going with the Cinderella story Ohio University's John Gross. Now, I kind of agree with this decision. It's definitely good to get a new coach, especially one who has been under very good coaching staffs with Thad Meta and Drexel in Ohio State, and now finally taking over for Ohio. He played really well with Ohio, going a record of 86-50, but the one thing that stands out to me is he was only 38-30 in the MAC conference. Now, if you're going to be a powerhouse, especially Illinois playing in a big conference in basketball, the Big Ten, going only 38-30 is going to be a really tough task to continue to and go towards the top. Now, the one thing that drew him towards Illinois was the fact that he is good at recruiting in his area, and the one problem Bruce Weber had was not recruiting in the Chicago area. But the guys that I wish had come out was going to be Shaka Smart from VCU and Brad Stevens from Butler. Unfortunately, we were not able to come up with that, so we get the new Cinderella story of Ohio State's John Gross. So I please and hope John Gross gets some Chicago players playing for Illinois. And here's Carl with his buzzer beater.
Thanks, Jeremy. One thing that's confused me recently is that apparently there are two opening days in Major League Baseball now. We have the opening in Tokyo that occurred last month in March between Seattle and Oakland, and it was a two-game series. Now, I understand playing overseas that, we want to get more international with our baseball here, but I wouldn't consider that part of the regular season. Whereas because tradition has been regular season opens with the World Series champions, and that's the St. Louis Cardinals, and they actually open stateside tomorrow when they take on the Florida Marlins. I just want to put my opinion out there that I disagree with this having two opening days. Just make it a part of a preseason game, and I'm pulling for the Cardinals to pull out an opening win tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Clutch Time. I'm Jeremy Culver.
And I'm Carl Farron. Please catch us on our next show.
Have a good night, everyone.